In this video, I'm going to discuss freelancing strategically so that you can spend more time in your business doing what it is that you do well and creating space for you to be able to grow and scale. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Chris Bindley and I'm the founder of Straight Up Digital and Straight Up Coaching. And I've been looking after clients for the last 16 years or so. And one of the common things that come up is that people are looking to grow, but finding people is hard. Finding good people is hard, but also quite often people don't need resources full time. And certainly quite often I find that cost is an issue. So in this video, I'm going to share with you my top 3 tips for how I've done that successfully for myself and also for other clients. So the first thing is knowing what to delegate and knowing what to keep in-house. And I think this is really important because there certainly are tasks that are absolutely worthwhile delegating or outsourcing. And there's definitely, from my experience, some that are not. So some examples that would be quite useful is if they are repetitive tasks. Now, a repetitive task could seem like a mundane task, or it could simply be a specialized task that's done frequently that takes you away really from the core thing is that you do. So let's take, for example, a plumber. Now, a plumber, I think it sort of seems obvious as a tradie, makes his or her most money when they're on site billing the customer. They don't make their most money or their highest value when they're doing operational tasks. So what is it that could be done by a freelancer for a plumber? Well, a repetitive task like social media, potentially operationally. Finance is something, although that's a challenge because there's some potential legal ramifications around that. But repetitive tasks is definitely one. Another is specialized tasks. So for me, video editing is a hard one. I think it's quite relevant to this discussion because video editing is that one thing that I can do, but I'm not great at doing, and it takes me a while, but it's not a strategic thing. So I'm able to take a raw video, give it to a video editor, and get them to do it as per a guideline that I give them. And they do it much better than I do, and they do it faster and cheaper. Now, I can say that I've actually had an in-house videographer, and it was a great experience for me. What I found, though, is that I definitely had to make sure I kept them busy. So if I had a part-time person locally, yes, that would be useful. For me, though, because I've leveraged the world's economy for the last 15 or 16 years, I can get a task done much cheaper, much more effectively, as long as I give that person the strategy and a specific instruction. Then I can actually have that either done locally here or by myself. So that second point would be really to, outsource where you can your specialized skills. And then I guess those final points really are the low impact activities that aren't strategic in their nature. Now, on the flip side of that, some of the things that you might not want to outsource would be anything to do with strategy. So your marketing strategy itself, probably wouldn't outsource that. If I'm going to be, honest, if your marketing strategy is outsourced to a freelancer, that's a worry because I guess the question is, what are you actually doing in your business? The second thing that I would look probably to keep in-house, you mightn't do these things, but the strategy behind them, I think I'd keep in-house, and that's the branding. So while you might get someone to actually do the logos and do the design, you would definitely want to be very closely involved in keeping the branding and the style and the brand guidelines and the brand values in-house. I remember when I originally formed Straight Up Digital, I really thought about those brand values and what they mean to me. So even though I couldn't create the design at the level that I wanted, it was important for me to keep those brand values in-house. Another thing, which is a really hard one that people like to outsource, but I would suggest that you don't, is customer service or any client relationship discussions, because for me, that's the biggest opportunity where customers might churn. Now, there sort of brings me to another point around the difference between outsourcing or freelancing versus remote employees. Now, I have remote employees and I have freelancers. I run a digital marketing business, so the definition of remote for me is that I can't see that person face to face. At one point, I had 8 PAYG employees locally, about 20 people around the world. For me, I've changed that model simply because of the nature of the products and services that I deliver. But I'm no stranger to having remote employees. So my remote employees, they do what they do for me. It's just that they don't do that in-house. And that for me is different to a freelancer. Now, how I define the difference really is, do I pay them for an outcome or do I pay them for a skill? So for example, with a videographer, I pay them to do something for me. If I had a full-time videographer, then they would be on staff and they would, be responsible for a period of time that they work for me. And indeed, that's probably the case in Australia. One of the biggest differences between a subcontractor and an employee, if you kind of look at the guidelines, is do you decide when a task is done by them? Do you set a deadline or do you pay them for the outcome? And for me, that's probably the difference. So, you could have a remote customer service person, although that's a challenge simply because of people's preconceived notions around what employees are and are not. All I'm suggesting is to give it some thought around, what you would look at in terms of being the most important core thing in your business. So then the next thing that I wanted to talk about, speaking of important things, is clear briefs. If you just freelance to a person and you're very broad in the sense of what you ask them to do, then you're probably not going to get back what your expectations are. Now, for me, again, we'll just use that common element of the video. For me, if I just say to a person, here, edit this, I could get any manner of different types of creatives back. I think for me, some level of scripting to them with input, I probably really want to be able to give them some of our brand guidelines so that they know what the look and feel is. And I'll give instruction around the style of video. So my most common thing is to give someone something that I like. So here's a channel or an episode that I like. I like the transitions A, B, C. I like the color schemes. I'm suggesting be specific. If you have a particular freelance role that you're looking to fill, it's the same as a local person. Remember I said the difference between a freelancer and an employee is hours versus outcome. So it's important to give an outcome, but it's also important to look at the steps and be very specific. So outline exactly what you're looking for, what the objective is, have a deadline, encourage questions, and most of all, as I said, be specific. I've written in some of my notes here, be specific. You probably can't be too specific, and it's trial and error. And then the last point I wanted to mention is to prioritize relationships, not transactions. Now, if you just want a transactional relationship, that's almost an oxymoron. If you just want a transaction between a freelancer and you, that's fine, but just expect for what it is. You've asked for something, you've got something in reply. If you want them to be asking questions to try to do the best work that they can, then I would suggest that you focus in more on who they are and are they being supported by your freelance relationship with them. So commonly, I like to know that the amount that I'm paying somebody is fair. It's very common that I ask a person that if we've negotiated a price, do they think that that's fair? Because if they don't think it's fair, it doesn't matter whether they'll say yes. And look, this is the thing that I think everybody does get hung up on. you can get a person as cheap as you want, but you know what? You do get what you pay for. Freelancers aren't dumb. They're very, very intelligent people, and most of them are business owners themselves, and they're looking to do the same thing for you. So my opinion is there's no difference between $4 an hour or $40 an hour for something that's done 10 times faster. So you really need to think about what it is that you're asking for versus what it is that you pay the person for in terms of a fee. I don't normally have an hourly rate. I normally have an outcome. So for me, again, there's exceptions to this, of course, but normally I negotiate a flat fee, and it's usually for an outcome. And I like to understand a little more about who it is that I'm working for. I mean, I've got a virtual assistant in the Philippines. I've got a couple of people that work for me in India, and I also have people in 3 or 4 other countries around the globe. And I'm pretty in tune with what the cost of living is in that area to make sure that what it is I'm actually paying is fair pay to them. Now, I'm not the fair pay police or anything like that. I'm just saying that if you pay a person a fair amount for a particular task, then you will more likely get higher quality return for that task. And one of the other things I find it's important is to be collaborative rather than demanding. I think that the more you demand, the less you're going to get out of box thinking. And some of the best stuff I've seen has been when a team member or a freelancer has done something that I wasn't expecting, but it's actually better than what I was actually thinking. So sometimes it's good to put your ego aside. You're actually freelancing or requesting a freelancer because you don't have the skills. So sometimes it's important to just listen to what they say. And yeah, I mean, take it from me. I've been freelancing for 15 years, and yeah, I've learned a lot of things along the way because of that. And in terms of platforms, I've seen quite a few. One of the ones that I've had a lot of success with over the last maybe 4 or 5 years is freelancer.com. And there's definitely a lot of things I love about the platform. There's another major website called Upwork, which has gone on an acquisition path with a couple of other companies. They bought Odesk many years ago. There's also Fiverr, although with Fiverr, that's kind of grown a little bit to what it used to be. It used to be that you bought a task for $5, hence the term Fiverr.com. But between the three of them, you might find there's a bit of a mix across those. My experience with Freelancer is it's been positive because you can pretty much get everything done in the platform. There's only really a couple of little challenges there. I find that the mobile app's a little frustrating. Maybe that's just because I've got an iPhone. Also, if you need to share personal details, not your own necessarily, but it could potentially be your own email address because you need it for a platform for your website. You just got to be very cautious of the guidelines for what you can and can't share, because sometimes, I've heard of people getting blocked because of that. So just something to think about. There's some key platforms there that can be of use to you. I would suggest, like I said before, if you look at the 3 key areas that I've talked about today, the first area really is knowing what to delegate and knowing what to keep in-house. The second is to make sure you have clear briefs. I think being clear, being specific is very, very important. The last point is to prioritize relationships over transactions. I think it's important you think for the long term, because it's likely that you'll have that person do multiple things, and the more frequent that they do what they do, the better that either they'll get at doing what they do and knowing your brand, or you'll get actually at interacting with them. So I hope this video has been of use to you. If you're watching this long, then I would think that it has been. I'd love a like and a subscribe, and turn the notifications button on. What I'm going to be doing is shortly releasing some courses that will be actually taking information like this and really doing a deep dive into some of the transformational stuff that you can apply in your business beyond what I've talked about today. You will actually see in the description a link to my waitlist. So jump on that. And as soon as the courses are ready and you're able to have access to them, I'll be broadcasting that out to people, which will be sometime in the early new year. So thank you very much, and I look forward to speaking to you again shortly.